Picture this. It's the 18th century, and the map of India is being completely redrawn. And at the center of it all is one group, the Marathas, who go on this incredible journey from just trying to survive to becoming the most powerful force in the entire subcontinent. This is that story, the story of their pivot from the brink of collapse to the masters of an empire.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How in the world does a kingdom that's basically on the ropes, fighting for its very life, manage to turn things around so dramatically that it ends up dominating, well, almost everything? That's the puzzle we're going to unpack right now.
The secret really was a complete 180 in their strategy. For years, it was all about defense, a constant struggle against the massive Mughal Empire. But then, they flipped the script. The new policy? Aggressive expansion. And get this, instead of fighting the Mughals, they decided to protect them. It was genius. They adopted this new philosophy. Restoring an old temple is as good as building a new one. Why bother building a whole new empire from scratch when you can just take over the existing one from the inside? This wasn't just a change in tactics, it was a total change in how they saw the world.
All right, so to really get how this all happened, we're going to walk through 5 key moments. First, the big shift in power. Then, we'll see how the kingdom actually split in 2. After that, the rise of a new kind of leader, the Peshwas. Then we get to the fun part, the lightning-fast campaigns of a military mastermind. And finally, we'll see how a new empire was forged. Let's jump in.
So what was the spark that lit this whole fire? Well, it all kicks off with the death of the formidable Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. His death didn't just leave a throne empty, it created a massive power vacuum across India. And for the Marathas, this was the golden opportunity they'd been waiting for, to finally switch from defense to offense.
All of a sudden, the Mughal Empire, this giant that had dominated for centuries, looked shaky. The court in Delhi was a mess of infighting, and threats were popping up everywhere. You had invaders from Iran and Afghanistan pushing from the northwest, and inside the empire, powerful local lords, the Rajputs, the Jats, you name it, started carving out their own turf. The giant was stumbling, and the Marathas were ready to move.
But here's where it gets interesting. The move that really got the ball rolling didn't come from a Maratha attack. Nope. It came from a clever and frankly desperate gamble by the Mughals themselves. To try and weaken the Marathas, they decided to release a royal prisoner they'd held for years, hoping he'd go back and start a civil war that would tear the kingdom apart from the inside.
And this is the man at the center of it all, Shahu Maharaj. He was the rightful heir to the Maratha throne, but he'd spent most of his life as a captive in Mughal camps. So the Mughals let him go, betting that his return would ignite a huge family feud for the crown. And you know what? They were right about the war, but they dangerously underestimated who was going to come out on top. What happened next was fast and brutal. Shahu came back to claim what was his, but Maharani Tarabai, the regent who had been running the show very effectively while he was gone, wasn't about to just hand over the keys. Their armies clashed at the Battle of Khed. Shahu won the day, captured the capital, Satara, and was crowned king. So the Mughal plan kinda worked. It didn't destroy the Marathas, but it did split them right down the middle.
And this is what the board looked like after the dust settled. You now had 2 Maratha kingdoms, Satara, under the new king Shahu Maharaj, and Kolhapur, where Maharani Tarabai set up her own rival court. Now, this division could have been a disaster, but instead it accidentally created the perfect conditions for a whole new kind of power to emerge. So with the kingdom split and the king's authority a bit shaky, a new power player enters the game. This wasn't a king or a general, but an office, the office of the Peshwa, or prime minister. And this would become the real engine of Maratha expansion. The key figure here was a man named Balaji Vishwanath. He was an absolutely brilliant administrator who became Shahu's first really powerful Peshwa. He managed to convince all the powerful independent Maratha clan leaders, the Sardars, to rally behind Shahu, which stabilized the whole government. But his real genius? It was all about the money.
Which brings us to a huge question. How do you pay for an empire? Conquest is seriously expensive. Balaji Vishwanath found the answer, not with a sword, but with a pen, through some brilliant diplomacy with the very empire they used to fight.
This right here, this was the economic superpower that funded everything. In 1719, Balaji got the Mughal emperor to sign off on 2 unbelievable deals. First, Chothai, which gave the Marathas the right to collect 1/4, 25%, of all the taxes from Mughal lands in the south. Then, Sardeshmukhi, which gave them another 10% on top of that. Think about that.
They were now legally entitled to over a third of the Mughals' revenue in the Deccan. This was a fire hose of cash, and it was about to pay for the armies that would march all over India.
So you've got a stable government, you've got money pouring in, the stage is set. All that was needed was a leader with the vision and the guts to use this new power. And the man who stepped up would unleash an age of military expansion like nothing India had seen before.
Meet Peshwa Bajirao I, Balaji Vishwanath's son. He took over in 1720, and he was not just an administrator. He was a charismatic, unstoppable general. For the next 20 years, he would personally lead his armies in a relentless push north, making the dream of a pan-Indian Maratha empire a reality.
His campaigns were just a blur of victories that completely redrew the map. He outsmarted and crushed the powerful Nizam, the Mughals' top guy in the south. He took the strategic province of Malwa, which was basically the doorway to northern India. He liberated the kingdom of Bundelkhand, marched his army right up to the gates of Delhi itself, and he even took on a European power, the Portuguese, and won. This wasn't just a series of battles, it was a storm.
Let's zoom in on one of these campaigns just to get a feel for how this guy operated. Over in Bundelkhand, a local Hindu king, Chhatrasal was in deep trouble. He was trapped, beaten, and surrounded by a powerful Mughal commander. He was out of options. So he sent a desperate plea for help to the one person in India he thought could save him.
In a now legendary letter, Chhatrasal wrote this to Bajirao: "My situation is like the elephant whose leg is caught by the crocodile. You are the only one who can save me." Now, this wasn't just a cry for help. It was an admission that Bajirao had become the ultimate power broker in India. And Bajirao, who never backed down from a challenge, personally marched his army to Bundelkhand and absolutely smashed the Mughal forces.
And you have to understand, these campaigns weren't random. Every single victory was a calculated move, another piece of the puzzle, all part of a grand plan to build a new empire. Bajiral's goal was simple: establish total Maratha dominance over everyone else in India, from the Mughal emperor in Delhi to the European forts on the coast.
Just look at the timeline here. The pace is absolutely breathtaking. In just 20 years, he completely dismantles the old power structure. 1728, he beats the Nizam. 1737, he shows up at Delhi's doorstep, giving the Mughal emperor the shock of his life. And in 1739, he does what many thought was impossible. He captures the massive Portuguese fortress at Versailles. By the time he died in 1740, the game had changed. The Marathas were on top.
So, what's the bottom line? Through pure speed, unbelievable audacity, and strategic brilliance, Bajirao I took the Marathas from being a regional headache to being the undisputed heavyweight champion of India. He didn't just win battles, he forged an empire.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question. By the middle of the 18th century, the Mughal Empire was a shadow of its former self, and the Marathas were the dominant power. From where they were standing, it must have looked like their rule was set in stone. But history, as we know, always has another chapter. A new power was coming, not over the mountains but across the oceans. So the question became, who or what could possibly challenge the new masters of India?